the fight against diseases back on Earth, paving the way for breakthroughs that benefit us all and enabling new economic opportunities in space.
Welcome Axiom 3 on board the International Space Station.
From our vantage point more than 200 miles above Earth, we are not just spectators. We're gaining unprecedented insights into the world we call home, and we're sharing our findings openly. We're not just achieving results today. We're sparking inspiration in future generations of explorers and embracing the power of global collaboration as we reach for the stars.
What was your favorite experiment on the International Space Station?
Toby, great question. My favorite experiment was the one that I got to eat. It was us growing hatch chili peppers in our plant habitat.
Station Huntsville on 2. We have video in Node 1. Look at those chili peppers.
And as we soar through space at 17,500 miles per hour, each moment is a step closer to unlocking the mysteries of our Earth, our universe, and propelling our pioneering spirit even farther into space. So come along for the ride aboard the International Space Station.
Well, you heard a moving and saw a moving tribute to the science that's going on board the
Startup stage 1 cryo helium loading.
And there you heard the call out that we're now cryo loading liquid oxygen into the Falcon 9 rocket. Another great milestone passed. T-minus 29 minutes and counting. And here's now more about the crew that's going into space today. U.S. Space Force Colonel Nick Hague is your Crew-9 commander. He was selected by NASA as an astronaut in 2013. This will be his second space flight to the International Space Station. In 2018, as we've mentioned, he and his Soyuz crewmate experienced a catastrophic rocket booster malfunction after launch. They were forced to abort, but landed safely 5 months later. 5 months later, I should say, Hague launched on another Soyuz and served as flight engineer for expeditions 59 and 60. He spent a total of 203 days in space and performed 3 spacewalks. The Kansas native is a test pilot and a distinguished graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Nick spent 5 months in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He voluntarily transferred from the United States Air Force to the U.S. Space Force in 2021 and is an active colonel. His wife, Katie, is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel, and they have 2 sons. This is mission specialist Aleksandr Gorbunov's first flight to space ever. He studied engineering with qualifications in spacecraft and upper stages from the Moscow Aviation Institute. Gorbunov graduated from the military department with a specialty in operation and repair of aircraft, helicopters, and aircraft engines. Before his cosmonaut selection in 2018, he worked as an engineer for a rocket space corporation and helped support cargo spacecraft launches from the Baikonur Cosmodrome.
Aleksandr and Nick are an excellent pair. They've trained together for a long time alongside Stephanie Wilson and myself.
Highly trained and ready to go. T-minus 27 minutes and counting until liftoff. Let's head back out to NASA's Megan Cruz, who's joined now by NASA Administrator Bill Nelson and Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy.
I am, and it's so great to have them here at Florida always. You know, Administrator, the weather seems to be improving, so we're hopefully poised to send another 2 astronauts to the International Space Station, where, of course, you know, we've had American astronauts there continuously for over 20 years. Talk to us about how international partnerships really help with American ingenuity in space.
Well, first of all, it shows that we are looking beyond our borders because we need our friends out there in other countries, and they have contributed greatly to this program. So, for example, on the big rocket that's going to go to the moon, it has the European support module from the European Space Agency. On our space station, there were originally about 15 international partners. And the number of countries that have used the space station is upwards of plus 40. So it is very much an international space program. And that's why it's called the International Space Station.
And actually, I'm going to ask you one more question since we're talking about how the International Space Station is really a test bed for us as we return back to the moon, go farther to Mars. Let's talk about the Artemis 2 mission. Are there any updates for that as we look forward to sending 4 astronauts to orbit the moon?
Well, we are looking forward to the next flight, Artemis 2. The crew has been named. Reed Wiseman is the commander. They're going to do everything in preparation for the 3rd Artemis, which will be the one that will go into lunar orbit, hook up with a SpaceX lander, and we will have then the first woman and the next man will walk on the moon.
Yeah, something exciting to look forward to. Now, Deputy Administrator, let's go back and talk about Crew-9 now. So, we're launching with 2 empty seats. That's so NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams can return with Nick and Aleksandr early next year. What have Butch and Sunny been able to accomplish on the ISS since they got there in June?
Well, the good news is having 2 extra sets of hands means more than 80 hours a week of extra work that can go into critical science, but also maintaining the station. So they have really contributed. Crew time is really precious on orbit. It feels like there's never enough. But I would like to highlight a couple of experiments that they have been working on that I think are exciting, both because of how they impact future spaceflight, but also people here on Earth. So the a water management experiment, which is testing different techniques for transporting water to plants. Now, in space, in microgravity, water doesn't flow the same way without gravity to take care of it. But what's interesting is not only will that help us when we go to the moon and we go on to Mars, the ability to grow our own plants, but it also affects hydroponic systems here on Earth. The other experiment that I think is really significant is looking at taking some tissue cultures of the bone marrow that creates platelets, right? Very important in our blood system. And they're going to grow them in cultures. And part of that is to look at blood clotting and how those cells develop and how it might work in space.
Right.
But it also is going to help us understand blood clots better here in gravity by being able to compare the two.
I know.
So they are doing very significant science.
Yeah, it's always so great to have veteran astronauts there as well. All right, so let's head back over now to our commentators in Hawthorne, California. Thank you both.
Thank you, Megan. As we continue to count down, let's take a closer look at the vehicles that will be taking Crew-9 to the International Space Station today. Falcon 9 is a 2-stage rocket developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first and currently the only orbital class rocket capable of reflight. Sitting at the top of Falcon 9, Dragon and its trunk stand over 26 feet tall. There are 2 windows on the spacecraft, plus 1 under the nose cone. The nose cone opens shortly after launch to expose the forward bulkhead thrusters and docking mechanism that will connect to the space station. Dragon's trunk holds solar cells, which power Dragon while it's in free flight. The trunk can also carry unpressurized cargo.
Dragon has 16 Draco thrusters that can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. That doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the space station. There's currently 4 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions that have docked to the station, and those are Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, and Freedom. Designed to be the safest spacecraft ever flown, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit and beyond.
Crew-9 is SpaceX's 15th human spaceflight mission since 2020, when Dragon became the first private spacecraft to take humans to the International Space Station. Dragon has completed over 47 launches and flown 54 astronauts representing 14 countries. Throughout all of those missions, Dragon has helped support more than 1,000 experiments. Altogether, the reusable Dragon spacecraft have completed 8 human spaceflight missions on behalf of NASA and visited the station 42 times under NASA's commercial resupply and commercial crew programs.
And through all of that, Dragon has proven to be quite a versatile spacecraft. It can autonomously dock to the space station when outfitted with the ISS docking adapter, as it is for today's flight. When not going to the space station and in free flyer mode, the docking adapter can be swapped out for a cupola. Then, of course, you have our newest option, the Skywalker hardware, to support extravehicular activities, which the crew just used for the first time during Polaris Dawn. Continuing down the vehicle, we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine, and this engine is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. After stage separation, the MVAC will ignite and carry Dragon to its target orbit. The Falcon 9's first and second stages are connected by the black interstage, which houses the MVAC engine and the systems that decoupled the two stages during stage separation. Below that, of course, is the first stage, which is powered by 9 Merlin engines. These 9 Merlin engines provide the initial thrust to lift Falcon 9 off the pad and clearing the tower through the lower, thicker parts of the Earth's atmosphere. Each of these 9 Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, and that gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust.
After stage separation, stage 1 will return to Earth for recovery and reuse on a future mission using a combination of the Merlin sea-level engines and the 4 titanium grid fins located near the top of the booster, which will guide it during its re-entry and landing. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy just before landing to allow for a vertical touchdown on either a drone ship or a landing pad. And today we'll be attempting to land this booster at landing zone 1
Stage
back at
2
Cape
fuel
Canaveral
load
Space
is
Force
complete.
Station. The second stage will power Dragon into its initial low Earth orbit before separating, leaving Dragon to continue its journey to the space station using its own thrusters. About 40 seconds after separation, Dragon's nose cone deploy sequence will begin, exposing the guidance navigation controls that help Dragon autonomously fly to the space station.
With T0 coming up in just under 20 minutes, our teams at the Cape are doing a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for flight. So for now, let's check in with Ronnie for a quick status update.
Thanks, Atticus. We are still looking good for an on-time launch just under 20 minutes from now. Both Dragon and Falcon 9 continue to be healthy. As we continue to listen and watch the countdown, our teams are prepping the vehicle for flight. Propellant loading of both RP1 and liquid oxygen began at T-minus 35 minutes. We also heard the call out that the launch escape system is now armed. The launch escape system is designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the event of an emergency during launch. The range, which is monitoring the keep-out zones, among other key flight requirements, also continues to report no issues, and they are go to support today's launch. As you heard earlier, weather is also looking good, and we are still tracking roughly a 30% chance of violation at our target liftoff time. But we are optimistic that we're going to have good conditions at that T0. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch window driven by our planned rendezvous point, the point at which Dragon and station will meet in orbit. The space station is currently orbiting the Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour, and Dragon needs to catch up to it. That means we have to deliver Dragon to the correct orbit by timing its trajectory relative to the orbiting laboratory so that they are in the same place in space at the same time. A precise liftoff time is crucial for hitting that rendezvous point. Of course, that means that at this point, if we hear a hold for any reason, we'll have to stand down and target our backup opportunity, which is tomorrow at 12:54 Eastern Time. Now, with all systems go, I'm going to turn it over to Nilofer for a status update from Houston.
And thank you, Ronnie. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, teams are continuing to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the team inside the room is Flight Director Nicole McElroy. The team in Mission Control Houston, the team in Hawthorne, and the astronauts aboard the space station will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Freedom on Sunday when they enter joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, the invisible boundary that helps us monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. Once docked, Dragon Freedom's crew will perform a series of leak checks, then work to open the spacecraft's hatch before floating into the station to begin their 5-month stay. We anticipate that the hatch will be opened about an hour and a half after docking. When they enter the orbital outpost, Crew-9 will be greeted by the rest of their Expedition 72 crew and will come together for opening remarks. The anticipation for launch continues here in Mission Control. How's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
Well, we're looking pretty good, Nilofer, and thank you very much. Weather improving here at the Kennedy Space Center. If you're just joining us, we are 16 minutes and 37 seconds away from the launch of the 9th astronaut rotation mission to the International Space Station under NASA's commercial
Stage
crew.
2 LOX load has started.
And there you heard Stage 2 LOX load has begun, the final loading of propellants into the Falcon 9 rocket. Commander Nick Hague and mission specialist Aleksandr Gorbunov are strapped into their seats inside Dragon Freedom. As you can see right there, the Falcon 9 rocket fueling operation well underway. The launch escape system is armed, and that means Dragon is prepared to launch itself away from the Falcon 9 in case of an emergency. So far, operations look and sound as expected, and we are counting down to liftoff at 1:17 and 21 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. And I want to welcome in a special guest here on set now. NASA astronaut Stephanie Wilson is here, joining us alongside Zena Cardman, both of you NASA astronauts. It is so good to have you both here. You both trained for Crew-9. This isn't where you probably expected to be on this day, but you have accepted this role of supporting your friends for launch. And as they get ready to launch with 15 minutes left to go, Stephanie, question for you. What is the mindset of the crew that you trained with? You've flown into space 3 times on the space shuttle. What's the mindset of the crew right now?
Well, thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Zena, for having me join you today. And yes, they both Zena and I have trained for 1.5 years with Nick and Alex. They have trained hard. They are well prepared. In this moment where they are strapped inside the vehicle with just the 2 of them, they are reviewing procedures. They have trained for this moment. They are ready to execute the mission. They are, of course, looking forward to the work that's ahead of them on the International Space Station. Perhaps a little bit sad to be leaving family and friends, but they'll be talking to them soon once they have docked to the International Space Station. But it's a moment to review all of the hard work that has gone into this moment in the preparation and to be ready to execute the mission, which they will do very well.
Speaking of hard work, you both trained for Crew-9 for 1.5 years. And so from a human level, we know you are professional astronauts. Your seats were needed for Butch and Sunny to bring them back. What was it like for you personally when you learned that you wouldn't be flying today, but you would be flying some other time, but not today?
Yeah, gosh, Daryl, I think I felt a lot of emotion when I saw Stephanie walking through the door there. It's bittersweet, but it's a really beautiful thing. I think any launch is a testament to the power of collaboration, and this launch maybe even more so than usual. I think from my perspective, it's a privilege and a choice to take part in something that's larger than yourself, and that's a choice that I make today and the next day and the next day. So in this moment, it's feeling exciting, it's feeling bittersweet, but for the most part, I'm feeling a lot of joy and pride in our space program, and so excited for our crew members, especially Aleksandr. This is his first launch to space. Nick, this will be his second mission to the International Space Station. It's going to be a beautiful day. And I think
for you, Steph?
Yes, very, very similar. I think that we all train together. Adaptability and flexibility is key as we look across our core. You know, we all train for various roles, and we select people that can serve in various roles and can be seamlessly thrown into different roles. And excited for them. We're always excited for our colleagues to have an opportunity to launch into space. Of course, we wish we could be with them. We have trained with them for this time. We of course want to be together. We have built friendship and camaraderie and learned for the roles for the Crew Dragon and for the International Space Station. But I am very excited for them, looking forward to hearing their stories from space and for seeing them launch.
And that launch just 12 minutes away, a little over 12.5 minutes away, the Falcon 9 rocket. Well, this is a booster that can be reused more than a few times with minimal maintenance. At the time that this launch happens, it will be flying over the International Space Station, rather, will be flying 260 statute miles over northeast Bulgaria. Crew-9 will then spend the next 28 hours or so chasing down the International Space Station for a rendezvous currently targeted for September 29th at 5:30 p.m. And we'll have live coverage on NASA TV of docking, which will arrive when it does dock, about 2 hours before. And so I want to thank Stephanie Wilson for coming in and joining us. We really appreciate your time and being here. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. As we continue to count down, T-minus 11 minutes and 42 seconds and counting getting close to terminal count. We want to commend both Stephanie Wilson and Zena Cardman for their professionalism and for their support of their fellow crew members and friends who are going up today.
That's absolutely right, Daryl. It's an exciting day to be here. And although 50% of us are staying on the ground this morning, we are part of this mission, this Crew-9 mission, and we're so proud to be part of the team that got this Dragon Freedom, Nick Hague and Aleksandr Gorbunov, ready for flight today. Thinking about another minute or so, we'll hear the next expected call that the crew displays are configured for launch. We'll hopefully hear at that point some great words from our commander.
That's right. Nick Hague is going to have some words for us, so we're going to tune into that. And you and I will join Stephanie outside and watch your friends launch to space. In the meantime, let's send it out to SpaceX in California.
Dragon, SpaceX. Confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
So good news there from Mission Control. And our next major countdown event will be around the...
And SpaceX Freedom. We can confirm our displays are configured for launch. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the entire team around the world for your hard work and dedication to get us to this point. Alex and I are ready and honored to represent you and everyone back on Earth. A huge thanks to our families and friends for your unwavering support, and to Crew-9, unbreakable. We go together.
SpaceX copies. You've proven you're ready, Dragon, and we're looking forward to seeing a full capsule at splashdown.
Really exciting commentary there from Commander Nick Hague. And with that, we are just about 9.5 minutes to launch. And right now, the Falcon 9 launch commit criteria are being checked by our onboard computers. Those launch commit criteria are specific thresholds and data that tell us that the rocket is healthy. There are many systems in place to ensure that the rocket and crew are both safe leading up to liftoff and during flight. And now that we're approaching terminal count, our teams are performing those final checks.
Just coming up on 9 minutes before launch right now, we just heard from Commander Nick Hague. He and Aleksandr Gorbunov are suited. They are seated in Dragon Freedom there, as you can see on the screen. We have teams here at Mission Control Hawthorne monitoring the vehicle, both Dragon and Falcon 9. Meanwhile, in Houston, as we heard from Nilofer, some of those teams in console positions are keeping tabs on the space station, its reboost capabilities, making sure everything is looking good for Dragon's arrival tomorrow. We're looking at about a 9-minute ride to orbit today, and that's the point that the second stage will cut off. After that, Dragon and the second stage will continue to coast for another few minutes, and then they will separate. You'll be hearing some performance calls as we get into this final countdown, and then after liftoff. These are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on trajectory, speed, booster performance, and other key milestones. And there are also some other calls you'll hear the crew make after liftoff. The crew will report out on a few number and letter combinations, and these mark different abort zones through the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two are 1A and 1B, and these are available when the first stage is firing. The next are 2A through 2E. Those will come into play once the second stage kicks in, but we will only hear the call for 2A. Diverting a little bit from the other naming system, you will also hear the call Shannon, and that refers to Shannon, Ireland. That means the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort later in the second stage burn. Again, you'll hear these calls throughout the flight uphill, along with the key performance callouts from the guidance, navigation, and control officer, as well as the propulsion lead.
One of the next callouts we're listening for in our countdown is the announcement that Stage 1 engine chill has started, which is one of the key processes that prepares the engines on board our first stage for flight. Right now, propellant in the tanks is isolated from the engines, but at T-minus 7 minutes, we'll open the engine pre-valves and start passing just a trickle of liquid oxygen through the Merlin engine pumps, chilling those engines for the start sequence.
Stage 1 engine chill has started.
Confirmation there that engine chill has started. Now, we do this because the super chilled and densified liquid oxygen on board is really, really cold. So we use the process to bring that engine hardware down to a cooler temperature before flowing all of the LOX and propellant into it during flight. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us to prevent thermal shock and ensures nominal engine performance. The next thing we're listening in for is the confirmation that RP1 load has been completed on board stage 1.
RP1 is that densified kerosene or rocket fuel that propels the crew into orbit. All of that RP1 is fully, or we are waiting to hear that it is fully loaded onto the rocket, and the second stage loading was completed earlier. So we're still loading liquid oxygen as well on the first and second stages.
Stage 1 fuel load is complete.
Confirmation right on time that RP1, the densified kerosene loading, is now complete. Again, still loading liquid oxygen on the first and second stages. We need this to combine with the densified kerosene. That RP1 liquid propellant needs an oxidizer to combine with in order to ignite. Coming up next at the 5-minute mark, we'll hear the call for Dragon to configure for terminal count and then transition over to internal power. And then we'll hear the propellant tanks on Falcon 9 are getting ready to pressurize, which means they'll have some additional rigidity and structural support for the rocket as we get ready for the strong back to retract. The strong back provides access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for both prop load and the different gases being loaded on board. The clamp arms will open and it'll move just a couple of degrees at first, and then we will see it swing open completely at the moment of liftoff. We'll continue to check through a couple more fueling milestones, including one around the 2-minute mark before flight, where we'll hear liquid oxygen loading is complete on the second stage.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
Dragon in configure for terminal count.
Now under 5 minutes to launch, we are in terminal count, meaning the Dragon onboard computers take control of the spacecraft. Again, we are still watching first stage as its liquid oxygen loading continues. That'll be complete around 3 minutes, followed by completion of second stage liquid oxygen loading about 1 minute later.
Strong back retract has started.
Just heard that call out from mission control that strong back retract has started. And if we keep a close eye on the screen, there we go, just coming out of those clouds of liquid oxygen, we got to see those clamp arms opening up around stage 2. What's going to happen now is that our strong back will recline just about 2 degrees away from the vehicle. But the TE will throw back all the way to 45 degrees at liftoff, clearing the way for Falcon 9 to leave the pad. As Leah mentioned, that strong back does route the vehicle's fluid and telemetry lines all the way up to the rocket and our spacecraft today. Good views of the strong back moving away from Falcon 9 and Dragon there on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. With that, we are just about 30 seconds away from LOX load completion on board the first stage.
As Ronnie mentioned, standing by just about 20 seconds from now. We're expecting to hear the liquid oxygen loading will finish. Again, this is required to combine with that RP1, the densified kerosene, to give us the chemical composition we need to propel the rocket into space. All of these white clouds of vapor you see on your screen are normal. We will continue to see them build as we get closer to launch. And that's due to this liquid oxygen. It's super chilled, so some of that does boil off in the hot Florida air.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
There's confirmation right on
Dragon
time.
in terminal count and on internal power.
That we both have LOX load complete on the stage 1 and that Dragon is on internal power. We are expecting LOX loading to last for just about another 30 seconds on board stage 2. And then we should see a vent down of the TE LOX lines. That's going to produce another one of those large white clouds moving away from the vehicle. Again, as Leah just mentioned, that is totally normal and happens when that cooler liquid oxygen that's venting off the surface of the tanks comes into contact with that humid Florida air along the Space Coast.
We're standing by now for stage 2 liquid oxygen loading to be complete.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
Dragon in auto idle.
With confirmation of that liquid oxygen load complete, gas closeout has
Gas closeout has started. Expect loud venting.
right on time. That gas closeout has begun. So we are now isolating all the feed lines for the different gas systems from the Falcon 9 rocket. Those will then get vented overboard through the umbilicals and the strong back itself. And you can actually hear that venting right now. Now, something else you'll see is our sound suppression technique. Our rockets are super loud, and that sound can impart pressure loads back on the rocket itself. So just before liftoff, you'll see a ton of water dumping onto the pad. This absorbs and prevents the sound from hitting the structure and reverberating back onto the rocket, which could cause
FTS is
damage.
armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling.
Dragon in countdown.
Now that we are in countdown, the flight computer on Dragon will switch to countdown mode. And we've also heard the flight
Freedom,
termination
SpaceX.
system is armed.
Go for launch.
Freedom is go for launch.
That's our final go for launch. SpaceX reporting go and the crew reporting
T-minus
go.
30 seconds.
Standing by for the first launch of
10,
humans
9,
from Space Launch
8,
Complex 40.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Ignition full power. And liftoff of Crew-9. Go SpaceX, go Falcon, go NASA.
Liftoff of Crew-9 now soaring to the International Space Station.
Stage 1 Alpha.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal. Copy 1 Alpha.
Those 9 Merlin engines now providing 1.7 million pounds of thrust, propelling Falcon 9 and Crew-9 and continuing to get good calls from teams here on the ground.
Of course, these incredible views mean we are just a little bit past 30 minutes or 30 seconds into our 9th rotational crew mission.
Power telemetry nominal.
On board Dragon and Falcon 9 with good callouts for mission control that everything is looking good. With that, stage 1 is throttling down to pass through max Q, which is the period of maximum dynamic pressure on Falcon 9 during ascent.
Max Q.
Confirmation of max Q.
Vehicle is supersonic.
And that Falcon 9 is now traveling faster than the speed of sound.
Stage 1 throttle up.
Stage 1 Bravo.
Copy 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage and continuing to get good performance.
MVAC chill is underway.
Crew is pulling just over 2 Gs at this point. Next up, we heard the engine chill on the second stage MVAC engine has begun, and then we will have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines on the first stage will cut off ahead of the first and the second stages, and then will separate from one another. Then that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite and continue to carry Crew-9 to orbit while the first stage begins its journey back to Earth. Two minutes in, and the crew is now traveling over 2,600 miles per hour.
Stage 1 is throttling down.
Confirmation there from mission control that stage 1 is throttling down as we prepare for main engine cutoff, followed shortly thereafter by stage separation and second engine start 1. You did hear mission control out that we are chilling our... There's confirmation of MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 Alpha.
MVAC ignition. Copy 2 Alpha.
With that, we have had confirmation of MECO, stage SEP, and the ignition of our MVAC engine on board stage 2. Our next major milestone is going to be the beginning of stage 1 boost back burn, which is expected in just a couple of seconds here. Of course, if you are just joining us, you've got views of our first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and of MVAC burning with our Crew-9 astronauts aboard up in space on the right-hand side of your screen.
Now we are coming up on 3 minutes and 20 seconds since liftoff today, traveling over 4,000 miles per hour and 76 miles downrange.
As our first stage makes its way back to Earth, we are tracking a landing attempt today at landing zone 1, not too far from where we lifted off in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there that both vehicles
Copy, nominal trajectory.
are on nominal trajectories. Everything is looking good.
And we're getting good performance on that single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The crew's G load dips right now. We are going to prepare to hit the separation event. Right now they're about 1 G, which is about what we're used to experiencing on Earth. Crew is traveling almost 5,000 miles per hour now and 105 miles in altitude.
As we await the entry burn for our first stage, you are getting great views of it on the left-hand side of your screen. You can also see 2 of our titanium grid fins, which are the primary mechanical structures.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Confirmation there from Mission Control that everything is still looking good.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
Now, as I mentioned, those grid fins are the primary mechanical structures that we use to steer the booster back toward its landing zone, which today is LZ1 at Cape Canaveral. Just as kind of a quick point of reference, those grid fins are about 4 by 5 feet, so roughly the size of a coffee table. Getting our first tracking shots of the booster on its way back to Earth. Again, we are tracking the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen and MVAC up in space on the right.
And we do continue to hear good calls for that second stage. Again, we will see this continue to fire until close to 9 minutes into the flight, now at 5 minutes and 45 seconds since liftoff today. This is accelerating Dragon to more than 17,000.
Nominal trajectory.
More good news.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
This second stage is bringing Dragon to more than 17,000 miles per hour. That puts our crew in orbit. And the single Merlin vacuum engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space.
Stage 1 does perform 3 burns on its way back to Earth. The first is the boost back burn, followed shortly thereafter by the entry burn. The entry burn is used by Falcon 9 to slow the vehicle down before it reaches the denser parts of the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal trajectory.
Nominal trajectories there from Mission Control.
Freedom copies, nominal trajectory.
That entry burn is, of course, followed by the landing burn, during which time we'll light 3 of the Merlin engines on board the first stage. And we expect to see that landing burn just about a minute before we expect Dragon to be inserted into orbit. So we have 2 very exciting phases of flight, both for our first stage and our Crew-9 astronauts happening here at the same time.
Stage 2 of TS has faced.
So a great touchdown of stage 1 there just a second ago. And now, of course, we are continuing to follow our Crew-9 astronauts on their way to space.
And we continue to get good calls for this second stage, that Merlin vacuum engine continuing to fire and propel our crew, now moving over 12,600 miles per hour and 611 miles downrange. just over 8 minutes since liftoff today, so we are expecting to see this continue to fire until just about the 9-minute mark, at which point this engine will cut off. And of course, Dragon will coast for a few minutes, still attached
Terminal
to the
guidance.
second stage.
Shannon.
That call.
Copy. Shannon.
That call is for Shannon, Ireland. That would be the abort zone if we were to abort at this point in the flight. However, we are continuing to hear good calls about Dragon's performance.
And back shutdown.
Confirmation of the Merlin vacuum engine shutting down.
Dragon, SpaceX, nominal orbit insertion.
Good news there from
And Freedom
mission,
copies nominal orbital insertion.
from mission control and our crew that we have had nominal
Dragon,
orbit insertion.
SpaceX, launch escape system disarmed.
Freedom copies LES disarmed.
In 9 quick minutes, we now have 2 new crew members on their way to the International Space Station, having taken off from Space Launch Complex 40. The crew now being in a good or expected orbit. We'll continue to coast for these few minutes, and then we get our first views inside the capsule of our 2 crew members, Nick Hague and Aleksandr Gorbunov. They are just continuing to stay in their suits and in their seats during this dynamic portion of the flight. We're going to continue to coast for a few minutes after this second stage engine cutoff. This allows the rates and motion from that long burn to settle out. There are some small reaction thrusters on the upper stage or the upper part of the second stage that can be used to counteract any residual motion. That basically makes sure we're in a stable coast before Dragon separates from Falcon, and that'll happen about 12 minutes into the flight. So about a minute and a half from now, we expect to see Dragon actually separating from the second stage. Again, we did hear the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit. And again, this is them now in microgravity, one of them, Aleksandr Gorbunov, for the very first time.
So as Leah mentioned, we are now just a few minutes away from the separation of Dragon from stage 2, during which time a number of activation checkouts occur. Automatically, first we're going to be checking out 12 of the Draco maneuvering thrusters, all around the service section of the Dragon spacecraft. We're also, of course, going to get ready for that nose cone opening, which will allow Dragon to dock with the International Space Station about 28 hours from now. The nose cone stays closed for the flight uphill to help protect against all of the guidance, navigation, and control sensors and Dragon's docking adapter. It's also covering 4 of our Draco thrusters that will be used for the majority of different phasing burns required as Dragon chases down the space station. We are currently standing by for that separation, which could happen anytime in the next couple of minutes.
Currently, you can see the crew is just relaxing in their seats. They are definitely vigilant, though. They are able to monitor those crew displays in front of them, keep up with what's going on in the mission. They could take control if they needed to. However, it's been a seamless ride to space today.
Good views there, looking up into Dragon's trunk, looking at the heat shield on the bottom of Dragon that Crew-9 will use when it returns home early next year.
Dragon, SpaceX, Dragon separation confirmed.
There.
And Freedom copies good separation.
There you heard from Mission Control. Both
Dragon, Chief Engineer on Countdown 1. Nick, Alex, on behalf of the entire team, we thank you for flying with Falcon 9 today and wish you a great mission.
And Freedom, this launch director on Countdown. On behalf of the entire SpaceX launch and recovery team, I'd like to extend our congratulations to the entire Crew-9 team. Zena, Stephanie, Nick, Alex, Butch, and Sunny. It's an honor to be a part of this mission with all of you. I'd also like to give a shout out to the Falcon 9 Crew-9 combo. The best bundle in the league, baby. Godspeed, Crew-9.
couldn't say it any better. Thank you guys. You know, we had the opportunity to meet so many people that were involved with the Falcon 9, and along the way was a sweet ride. I'm pretty sure my youngest son would say it was Sigma. Alex has got a few words to add as well.
All the entities that made this launch possible. Roscosmos, NASA, with SpaceX. And thank you to my family and friends for that support. And also, I'd like to express my gratitude to the hundreds of thousands of people around the world who are involved in the development of space technologies and community power. Today's launch is also their accomplishment. Хочу сказать спасибо Роскосмосу, НАСА совместно с SpaceX за успешный запуск человека на орбиту, за очередной успешный запуск, и также благодарить родных и близких за поддержку. Спасибо.
Incredible words from our commander and great views of Dragon up in orbit on your screen right now.
It's been about 14 minutes and 30 seconds since coming up on 15 minutes now since liftoff today. You got a quick look inside the capsule.
Dragon SpaceX, we had a nominal dehumidifier activation and service section Draco checkouts. Nose cone deploy is in progress.
And Freedom copies all. Thank you.
Confirmation there that our nose cone deploy is underway. That means that the 6 hooks that hold the nose cone in place during launch and the ascent portions of flight have begun to retract. That will allow the nose cone to start to swing open and deploy. That will uncover a number of critical systems for the flight up to the space station, including the forward bulkhead thrusters and the docking hatch. Incredible views from our crew up in space on your screen right now, but I'm sure it's nothing compared to the view out of Dragon's window as they make their way to the space station.
I can only imagine. And that journey to the space station will take about 28 hours, so they won't arrive until tomorrow afternoon. In the meantime, they will have the opportunity to get out of their suits, to get out of their seats as well, and kind of just enjoy the ride. They're going to shift into some off-duty time. That allows them to prepare any food that they would want to. That allows them to maybe even call down to the ground. They will also obviously get some sleep before a really big day tomorrow, monitoring the arrival and docking to the International Space Station. Of course, we're going to cover all of that live. I'm really looking forward to seeing 2 more crew members float into the orbiting laboratory. And if you're just joining us, we did lift off now at 16 minutes and 29 seconds ago. That was right on time at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 down at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We have 2 members on board Dragon today. That's NASA astronaut Nick Hague, who's serving as the commander, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Aleksandr Gorbunov, who's making his very first flight to space. Once they arrive at the International Space Station tomorrow afternoon, they will be joining 9 other crew members on orbit. They'll be up there for about a week. A week is probably the best guess until the Crew-9 team. It is time for that crew to come home. Of course, they launched about 7 months ago at this point, and they will undock after they have completed a handover period with the Crew-9 crew, bringing them up to speed on everything that they've been working on for the last 7 months in orbit. So once they depart, we'll be back down to our typical approximately 7 people living and working aboard the International Space Station.